You feel that? That nip in the air. The sniffles are starting. Winter is definitely on the way, folks. At this time of the year, I don't muck around. I fire up with Nature Bee's Power Pollen. It is packed with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, everything your body's screaming out for when that temperature drops. It's helped me stay sharp, healthy, and it helps me fight off that sluggish winter slump. It has been doing that for 20 years. And right now, you can grab a 6-month supply of Nature Bee's Power Pollen for $160. Plus, they're throwing in a bonus month and 2 bars of that famous pollen and honey soap. So before winter knocks on your door, click on the link in the description and get your supply of Power Pollen Nature Bee. Money back guarantee. Big thanks to Nature Bee for powering another episode of Bonafide. Now, before we get stuck into today's yarn, podcast fans, please let me ask you this. Have you ever been lying in bed after a late shift and you hear that dreaded from behind the walls? Well, you know it's rats and mice having a party and you're not invited. Now, that's where Pestrol comes in. Their new rodent-free Max is a no-fuss, plug it in and forget it kind of situation. In fact, it is the solution you're looking for. And it is safe for you, it is safe for your pets, and there's no poisons, no traps. It is solid Australian technology, and it keeps your pests out of your home. We've got 3. We've got 1 up in the kitchen, 1 downstairs, and 1 out near the barbecue area. You just plug it in, and it sends a message through the wiring of your home, and rats and mice hate it, and they leave. And it doesn't affect you or your pets. Pestrol, trusted for over 20 years. They've got your back. Head to pestrol.com.au or give them a bell. 1-800-33888. Problem solved. Pestrol, Pestrol.
In a world where voices are silenced,
Please.
one man refuses to lie down.
It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
He's been punted not once,
40 years they've been trying.
not twice,
You couldn't fire somebody if they were horrible, doing a terrible job.
but 3 times.
You're fired.
He doesn't tell you what to think, but gives you something to think about. Welcome to the Bonafide Podcast with Luke Boner. And he's not
All right, here we go.
done
Hold your ears, folks.
yet.
It's showtime.
Well, g'day and welcome to another Bonafide podcast, episode 37. And on behalf of me and the millennial, we'd like to thank you very much for downloading and sharing. Our growth is just fantastic, and let's keep it going. If there's something that you'd like us to talk about, if there's someone you'd like us to talk to, let us know. Luke Boner, radioguy@gmail.com, or jump onto our Facebook page, Luke Boner, that radio guy, and leave voice messages because we love your feedback. Coming up, investigative reporter Joey Watson on one of the darkest days in New Zealand's history, the mass shootings that took place in Christchurch, New Zealand, 15th of March 2019. Terrible, terrible story. The perpetrator was an Australian man, Brenton Tarrant, who was then aged 28. And what has happened here is that Joey Watson, who is a podcaster with Listener, has done an incredible deep dive into all of this, and it's a fascinating story. I urge you to stay with us because you're going to learn something. We're also going to talk to former New South Wales Minister David Elliot. This is an interesting bloke. He's held 8 portfolios within the New South Wales government. In fact, there's not much he hasn't done. He was Minister for Police, Corrective Services, you name it, he's done it. And he's got some very, very interesting stories to tell and some great theories on how we can make this place a better place. David Elliott's still coming. And our favourite, the ever moving forward, Truckee Tuesday, Rod Hannafy.
News updates.
Well, let's have a look at some of the news headlines that we've experienced this week. What about Coldplay? And they've issued a warning after the Kiss Cam gate. What a furor that was.
Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
I'm lost for words over this. Coldplay frontman Chris Martin has made a warning to concert goers on Saturday night US time, letting them know the Kiss Cam was about to be turned on and could broadcast their relationship to the world. My goodness gracious. Warning, adulterers, disentangle now. It comes after that extraordinary fallout from that Coldplay concert in Boston last week when the Kiss Cam settled on Andy Byron and Kristen Cabot, who were getting all canoodly and very, very close and embracing, and they were caught on camera. And he has now resigned from his business, a very successful business, Astronomer, an AI company. And the woman, Kristen Cabot, well, she's still there at the dropping of this podcast, but I doubt she'll be there much longer. She's in charge of HR. Our mate Graham Wynn has always said, folks, HR is not there for the employees. HR is there to look after management. It looks as though Kristen Cabot took that a little bit too far.
Angus Robertson looked headed for a stellar career, somebody made for the job, off to a successful start at ADFA where he'd already been given leadership roles. Now he's behind bars, sentenced to jail on 2 counts of rape and 2 acts of indecency.
A former ADFA cadet has been sentenced to almost 2 years in jail for raping a colleague in her academy room. God, more sexual abuse from the army. It's incredible, isn't it? An ACT Supreme Court judge has issued a scathing assessment of the ADFA, the academy, as he jailed a cadet for nearly 2 years for raping a colleague. 2 years? Is that all you get for rape? Do you only get 2 years for rape? Angus Ross Robertson, 24, was found guilty by a jury of 2 counts of rape and 2 of committing an act of indecency on a woman who lived in the same building at the academy. The victim told the court she had agreed to kissing Robertson, but told him several times, I do not want to do anything. More on that as we learn more, but it's disgraceful, isn't it? And only 2 years? Really? Pauline Hanson's in the news again. She's demanding Mark Latham return his seat to One Nation following allegations of abuse and manipulation. You know, it's a bit like the relationship that Donald Trump had with Elon Musk, isn't it? We saw that relationship was about to end in tears from the beginning. And when Pauline Hanson announced that she was going in partnership with former federal Labor leader Mark Latham, and he would run the New South Wales branch of One Nation, we knew it wasn't going to end well. And now Mark Latham has been accused of abuse, manipulation, and degrading sexual behaviour. And One Nation says, give your seat back to One Nation. I think she's right. I think she's got a point. And this is what really annoys me when, and you end up having by-elections that are very, very expensive. If you jump ship, if you get elected under the banner of a political party and you want to leave that party, you should resign. Or if there is, and maybe create a by-election and you run as an independent and not as a Green, as we've seen in the past. Lydia Thorpe, hello. Anyway, Pauline Hanson has torched this independent, Mark Latham, and we'll see what happens there. Now, we got this voicemail from Mal. Let's have a listen.
Hey, Luke and everybody. Just want to tell you about the probably the strangest thing I've ever seen while driving. Driving down the towards the fish markets in Sydney on I can't remember that on the road actually. And I was just come to a set of lights about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. This woman's popped out completely stark naked. Wanted to know if I actually liked what she looked like. And then about 30 seconds later, her boyfriend did the same thing. Popped out completely stark naked, walking around the city, just doing what they're doing. Probably the strangest thing I've ever seen. Also, I think for Rodney, when you're up in far north Queensland, around the Sonata Way, they have signs on bridges saying what channel to call up, what that call sign is. Why don't we do that in New South Wales, especially around Sydney, around places like Macquarie Pass and stuff like that that had channel signs and signage to tell trunkies what to do.
A couple walking around the fish markets naked, that'll do me. I have no comment. I'm lost for words. But please, the strangest thing you've seen while driving your truck, we want to hear about it. And I'll let Rodney next Tuesday answer that question. We got this email from Katie. Hi, Luke and Kels. I haven't missed one of your podcasts, and I was a keen listener on Triple M. Even one of the quickie ones. You guys are doing a great job. Please keep up the good work. We will, regarding the pet loss you talked about on the last podcast, I lost my beautiful red Kelpie, Kelly, about 2 years ago. I have since adopted a border collie from Western Queensland. I was sent this poem from a mate when I had to make a tough choice to put my little doggy down due to her cancer, and it really helped me accept and move on. I'll attach it as I don't have social media to share it on. I see on Spotify there was a comment from Susie, and it may help any others out there struggling pet loss. And it reads like this. When I die, please don't say, I'll never have another dog. Search for the ones who are abandoned and forgotten. Give them a second chance and let them take my place. Honour my life by saving another. God, I love that. I'm going to blow that up and put it in my man cave. And remember the prayer of the dog that I shared with Dr. Rob Zammit. I got this voice message from Nathan.
Hey guys, Nathan here. I totally agree with Adam, 100% what he said about, it's just going to set up, setting up these classes and stuff like that. It's just helping them out. It's just a disgrace. Like I said, it's a system that's failing us, and we need to look stronger and harder into doing these police checks and also other checks as well. Anyway, there we go. 100%. I trust it. I've been on it for 4 years now. Can't go wrong. That's a half a jar, by the way, half a jar there. But I've pre-ordered mine. Can't go wrong with Nature B. It's got me through the winter months. It's got me through COVID. I swear by it. And if it won't grow, get yourself some Swift Grow, because that stuff is a bee's knees. I tell you what, thanks to the barramundi, where would we be? Dead gardens, bad-looking roses, nothing for the bees to pollinate on. No Nature B. Keep up the good work, guys. Talk soon.
Well, there he is, an opinion on childcare. And there is now in practice in New South Wales tougher childcare laws, and they're trialling them. But look, as I said earlier, we can't do enough to keep children safe. And I love the fact that he loves his Nature B. There was his. I thought it sounded about half empty or half full. Listen, Nathan, send us your details. I'll send you 3 months of Nature B Power Pollen. Send us your details, and we'll make sure that arrives in the post. And SwiftGrow, Joe from SwiftGrow. He's not a sponsor of this podcast yet. Joe, where are you? But it's a very, very good product too, and I'm proud to endorse it. Coming up, investigative journalist Joey Watson and the terrible Christchurch murders back in 2019. He's done a deep dive into this. It's fascinating. When I was on the Triple M network working for Southern Cross Austereo, I had the pleasure of talking to Joey Watson, who is an incredible investigative journalist. And he's very, very thorough, leaves no stone unturned. And when he knows there's a good story, he sticks to it and tells the truth. And this is the second time I've had the pleasure of talking to Joey. He has a new podcast coming up on Listener, Listnr. That's right. I am dyslexic, but that's how they spell it. For the last 2 years, Joey Watson has been following the footsteps of Australia's worst terrorist, the Christchurch terrorist. And he's been trying to get his head around who or what led him to commit such a horrific crime. You remember the attack back in 2019 that killed 51 people. The terrorist has become known as a lone actor. Now, Australia has never had an inquiry into how he became radicalised or how our intelligence communities just missed him. Joey's found out the terrorist was actually hooked into a bunch of far-right communities that were networking internationally in the years leading up to the attack. He joins me now here in my little podcast studio. Joey.
Hey, Luke. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on your awesome podcast. It's now been running out for a little while, so that's great. I'm
36
really
episodes. I know. I didn't think we'd get one done.
Good on you.
But I've been pushed along by one amazing person you know very well, Kelsey.
That's right. Producer Kelsey is here with us. What a legend.
Otherwise known as Millie.
Otherwise known as Millie? Okay. Why is that?
She's the millennial.
Okay, sure. So she knows which buttons to push. Is that how it is?
Not only that, but when something goes wrong, she goes, oh, it's a glitch. Or it's your fault.
That's right. Always try and avoid spilling coffee on the console is what I've heard.
But this attack absolutely horrified the world.
Whilst I cannot give any confirmation at this stage around fatalities and casualties, what I can say is that it is clear that this is one of New Zealand's darkest days.
And what made me even more horrified was the YouTube interaction and how it was allowed to stay up live.
One man has been charged with murder. He didn't give the name. He said he was in his late 20s, but this main suspect is being widely named as Brenton Tarrant, a 28-year-old from Australia, and it's believed that he is the one who live-streamed himself opening fire at one of the mosques in Christchurch.
Which I'm still trying to get my head around, and I'll ask you about that too during the course of this conversation. Tell me, where did all this start? Take us through it.
So, when the attack happened, I was a 22-year-old just sort of getting started in journalism, and I'd started to see that this world of extremism had started to spill across borders. We had events like these protests in Charlottesville in America where a whole bunch of neo-Nazis had come out and chanted all sorts of extremely racist stuff, and it had sort of spilled over into violence. There had been a bunch of different terror attacks of this kind, but nothing of the extent of what happened in Christchurch.
But you look at Osama bin Laden and the power he wielded from a cave in Pakistan, and it crossed every border. It crossed every single border.
Well, that's a big thing, right? Because if you think about bin Laden, the world had been contending with this threat of Islamist extremism since 9/11, and that had certainly become apparent in the years before Christchurch, with a whole bunch of Islamist terrorist attacks in Europe. But we hadn't really paid attention to this other kind of extremism, which was predominantly white blokes who were being pushed to some pretty insane ideas on some edges of the internet, and beginning to commit acts of terrorism that kind of mirrored the Islamist terrorism that we'd been more familiar with in the years leading up, and that's what happened here. And I think with Christchurch in particular, because of that focus on Islamist terrorism, and it was a focus and it was a problem that needed to be contended with, and still does. We didn't really know about the worlds that this bloke had come from, the places where he was being radicalized, the people that he was interacting with, both on the internet and is also in the real world, because he'd also spent a decent amount of time in Eastern and Central Europe, and I actually followed in his footsteps on those two trips to try and work out what was going on there and who he was connected with. So, yeah.
Yeah, because it's very easy for people like me in the media to sit back and say, oh, we need to tighten our borders, we need more security, so that we don't have these people who slip through the cracks come in. But what are the red flags that someone young and impressionable has been not just radicalised, but pushed to the point where they can commit murders this terrifying?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, what I actually found is, I think after the attack, a lot of the commentary had sort of come to see him as being a bit psychologically disturbed, which of course plays a role here. But what I realised after I'd gone to his hometown of Grafton, a beautiful town in northern New South Wales, a lot of media had gone to Grafton in the aftermath of the attack, really flocked there trying to work out what had happened, is actually the answers to what had led him to the violence didn't exist in Grafton. Sure, that there were things about Grafton that could help to explain. He was, for example, bullied as a kid. He did have a difficult and broken home life growing up. His dad had sadly died of mesothelioma when he was at quite a young and impressionable age. But actually, from getting a record of all of his online posts that he'd made in the years leading up to the attack, I found out that very, very quickly, 4 years before the attack, so we're talking about 2015, 2014, 2015, he'd gone from being a relatively normal guy, kind of posting about things like his ambitions for world travel, asking for advice about what he should do with money that he'd inherited and where he should invest it, to very quickly talking about things like race wars and societal collapse and
all this is online.
And all of this is online.
So you would think
record.
Easily intercepted.
You think so. You think so as well. But also it sort of points to this thing that geez, this happened really quickly and seems to have been tactical. And so when I saw that, I thought, wow, the answers probably aren't in Grafton. They're probably somewhere else. And that's when I started to sort of look more around these spaces on the internet where he was occupying, and saw that actually there were people who were really, trying to create the sort of violence that we saw in Christchurch.
I actually happen to be very close to a bloke who is an undercover investigative detective with the Australian Federal Police. He has told me off the record, well, I'm not going to name him or her, could be a her, that they are constantly monitoring the internet and the darknet for key words, key phrases, and then red flags come up and they monitor them. This didn't happen here.
It appears that this was a case of a guy who slipped through the cracks. After the attack, Director General of ASIO, Mike Burgess, had sort of said that he wasn't on our radar and that there was no real changes to operational procedures for ASIO. Now, whether that's true or not, you can never be entirely sure because intelligence agencies, by their very nature, are secret. But certainly, what I didn't realize when I first heard that analysis was actually that he was in some of these online groups, and he was explicitly forecasting the violence that he was planning, and finding receptive audiences with neo-Nazi types in neo-Nazi groups in Melbourne and Sydney, for example. And when I saw these posts, really bone-chilling stuff, explicit references to the violence that he was planning, to the places that he was going to carry it out, and when you see that sort of stuff and you see it being encouraged and fostered by these communities, you start to think, this wasn't just some random aberration. It was actually something that was very deliberate and strategic. In saying that, intelligence is a difficult game. I've been lucky to have met lots of people that work for ASIO and for the AFP over the years, and it is a very, very difficult thing to do. But absolutely, it appears that there were certainly signs, and he was interacting with communities that were bigger than just himself.
Because, and I'm not going to mention the bloke's name because this podcast goes everywhere, including Tasmania, where no one mentions this bloke's name. But what happened in Port Arthur was horrific, but it wasn't a radicalised sense of there's a purpose behind what I'm doing and I'm going to rid the world of...
Yeah,
this was seriously, obviously, mental health.
Yeah,
and not an internet trail. There was with this bloke.
You're absolutely right, and I think that maybe that was part of the problem for why we dismissed it so quickly. Because Australia, from Port Arthur, from that horribly traumatic event, had an idea of what led to this sort of thing, what sort of psychological profile these guys might have, and I think it sort of got explained away as a Port Arthur, and for that reason, a lot of this stuff kind of got missed. That actually this guy didn't have any history of being psychologically disturbed. He was. Yeah, he was radicalised.
Yeah, but there was with the other bloke.
There was absolutely with Port Arthur.
No one could possibly see what was actually going to explode.
Sure.
So, Joey, tell me how you found the clues to what was on the terrorists' computer on a real estate website.
Yeah, well, this was crazy, right? So one of the things that we'd missed is how strategic the attack had been. So, for example, you'd mentioned the live stream that had been uploaded firstly to a website called 8chan and then to YouTube. What this guy had created was terrorism as theatre, not unlike when the planes had flown into the World Trade Center in 2001. It was created to be consumed, to be watched, to be replicated. It was an act of influential terrorism. But then another part of that preparation was that he had gone to quite extreme lengths to cover his tracks. And that included, as you mentioned, destroying or removing his computer hard drive, which had never been found. Investigators had never been able to retrieve it, which means there's big black holes in terms of understanding big parts of his online activity in the lead up to the attack, and also what was on his hard drive. It was a big tension in the investigation. But then the strangest, possibly the strangest lead I've ever received is there was a real estate website, a New Zealand real estate website, just for real estate listings.
Yeah.
And I got sent a link to this website by a source that I was interacting with, and he said, go to the third image and zoom in.
Right.
And I did that.
Yeah.
Enhanced the image, and it was a picture of his hard drive. So for some reason, when the real estate company had come to take pictures of his apartment, he left the hard drive logged in. And from that, we can see some of the programs that he was using. Firstly, more evidence of the extreme lengths he was going to cover his tracks, but then also that he was using a messaging app called Discord, which was very, very popular and used primarily by hardcore neo-Nazi terror groups in the US.
Wow.
And a whole bunch of stuff like this, and his only browser that he used, he didn't use Chrome or Google or whatever. He used a Tor browser, and it sort of really paints a picture of who he was and what he was doing in the years before.
But obviously well educated and had been taught all of this by somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about why you decided to take golf lessons from a Serbian war criminal in Belgrade.
Yeah, that was a very interesting experience. One of the more interesting experiences of my career, that's for sure. The terrorists had taken 2 trips to a corner of Europe known as the Balkans.
Yes.
And the first one was in 2016, end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And that was important because it was while he was there that he had emailed a gun club in New Zealand. This is before he'd moved to New Zealand.
Right.
So New Zealand investigators came to see that as his first step in his mobilization towards violence, but we didn't really know much about what he was doing there. And so while I was in Belgrade, I wanted to try and work my way into people that might have access, for example, with Serbian intelligence, who are historically kind of more Russia-aligned, not known for collaborating with Western intelligence agencies, for example. And that's how I came to be doing these golf lessons with this Serbian war criminal who kind of touts himself as having access to the regime. It was a very interesting couple of days. Yeah, but it also, kind of meeting him, I came to see how places like Serbia, where they'd had this awful war in the 90s in Bosnia, and Serb and Croatian forces had invaded, Bosnia and killed many Bosniak Muslims in really, really awful ways, and a lot of those people are kind of sort of still celebrated as heroes in Serbia, and I came to see how that would have had an influence on the way the terrorists saw the world. And when he did the attack, he'd written the names of Serb war criminals on his guns, and references to Serbian history and Balkan history.
Wow! So it was all part of your trying to line up dots. It's just incredible, the effort and the research you put into all of this. So obviously my next question is, what can we all now learn, and is it ever possible to fully protect ourselves against this sort of radicalisation?
I think, Luke, the thing to learn is that this threat is very real, and that it's something we need to be vigilant against. And the nature of terrorism is changing, and it's becoming far more difficult. I really don't envy our friends in the intelligence agencies for the work that they have to do. Just last Friday, or the Friday before last, an organisation called Terragram was given a terror designation in Australia. All Terragram is, Luke, is a bunch of chats. It's a bunch of chats on the internet. It doesn't have any discernible leaders. Doesn't have any assets.
Really?
It's quite crazy, almost science fictional when you think about it. Because back in the days, we had a pretty clear idea of what a terror organization looked like. They usually had a hierarchy, a clear idea of shared goals.
Like, for example, Osama bin Laden.
Exactly,
a clear leader.
100%.
They were saying, "Oh, great, we've cut the head off the snake," but the snake kept growing.
That's That's it. Yeah, and Bin Laden kind of picks his best and brightest.
But the loyalty,
with undying loyalty. Where now, like the relationship between the leader and the people who carry out the terrorism can be as much as just watching their videos or consuming their propaganda on parts of the internet that are difficult to access and often very hard to understand and fast moving. So if there's one thing I think it's important for people to know, that there was a much bigger story here behind Christchurch, and the threat.
What is that bigger story?
Well, it's the threat of this kind of extremist terrorism, Luke. It's he is now a non-entity. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. He doesn't matter, but the communities around him, they still exist.
But this is a bloke, Brenton Tarrant. I mean, we're talking about a 28-year-old bloke from Grafton that can do this. Take us back to that terrible day in 2019. Remind us what happened.
He was living in Dunedin in the years before the attack. He had trained relentlessly with semi-automatic weapons. He had
red flag.
Yeah, he'd surveilled the mosque. He'd gone there a couple of days before and flown a drone over it, and
really?
A couple of months before and flown a drone over it. So he was prepared. He did the 6-hour drive from Dunedin to Christchurch. He just pulled up on the side of the road, turned on his live stream, began playing music that was sort of meaningful to the communities that he was trying to broadcast this attack to. He posted on a website called 8chan and said what he's about to do, and said, please do your part, everyone, by sharing my message. And then he carried out an unimaginable attack on 2 mosques. And indeed, they did do their part. They shared it prolifically. YouTube was reporting an upload every second for the next 24 hours, and people were using techniques to modify the pixels so it would get around modification systems.
What was the name of it?
The website 8chan.
Never heard. Sorry, I'm really dumbass.
No,
okay.
no, not at all. But I think that's
what is
important. It's called 8chan. So the number 8.
Yeah.
Chan, and it
wasn't being monitored.
And this is probably why we kind of came to see him here as mad and obscure, is because a lot of these spaces were completely invisible to people that weren't in them.
Yeah.
They were important parts of the internet, and they were attracting large numbers of people. But if you weren't part of those worlds, they may as well not have existed. And that's really, what I found is being able to go back through them with the luxury of hindsight that journalism gives me, is to sort of expose all of these worlds and see how they existed.
Yeah, Joe Watson is with me, investigative journalist, and we're talking about the massacre in Christchurch back in 2019. When I first heard of the dark web, I typed in the dark web because I wanted to learn about it. And do you think just because on my Google Chrome I typed in the dark web, have flags popped up with ASIO on me because I'm looking it up?
I would hope not. I mean, it's very possible. I'm not 100% sure how ASIO's search results work and the nature of the work that they do to monitor that. But, I hope that if you were, for example, I was consuming religiously a lot of extremist material in researching this story, and I almost hope that it would have flagged something with ASIO. I hope that wouldn't have meant that they would have been able to get a warrant.
But they would say, "What is Joey Watson looking at? What's he looking at? Let's try and connect some lines here." But you would think so. You would hope so.
Sure.
I mean, I don't like Big Brother. I'm not fond of censorship, being in the job I'm in.
Yeah.
But you've got to have safeguards, and this is really important. How does someone become that radicalised?
Yeah, well, what I found is that there were people who were using these spaces, for example, 8chan and other websites around it, and they were realising that they had a lot of vulnerable young men who were liable to be radicalised very quickly into these ideologies, people who weren't historically into politics in any major way. And they realised that they could target these spaces and sort of carry out a mass radicalisation.
Because let me just give you an example, and he has since retracted this, but at the time, a high-profile sports person in Australia by the name of Anthony Mundine, who converted to Muslim, after 9/11, went on television and said he could understand it. And I went, what? Because how many Muslims also died in that attack on 9/11? He's since retracted that, but here's an Australian Indigenous bloke who plays rugby league and then went on to boxing, almost at the time making excuses for it. So you'd have other people who admired him going, oh yeah. And that worried me greatly at the time. I will say again, he's retracted it, but I'm not redacting it here because it's an example of how someone with these extreme violent views can influence people. Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
But this guy wasn't high profile. This was a nobody from Grafton.
Sure. But I think that there's something to be said for the way that leaders talk about certain communities, maybe other certain communities, the sort of rhetoric that you hear in society can have an impact on vulnerable people. And I think that's why, people need to be careful, particularly with big platforms, as to the way that the sort of messages that they spread, because, for example, this guy was a right-wing extremist, terrorist. He was basically, he pretended to sort of be anti-migrant, but actually behind the ideology was something much darker, some more elaborate fantasy about race wars and societal collapse. But within a democracy, there's room to absolutely have a debate about important issues like immigration, economy, and that's fine, and democracies will have those debates. But it's when that spills out into, and it can very easily sometimes spill out into the ostracization of entire communities, racist assumptions about people that maybe people have never even met or don't even know, and that kind of leads to a continuum of violence. So I think that there's probably something to be said, much like with Anthony Mundine in that situation, that leaders need to be cautious, not about the debates that they have. Debates are worth having, absolutely. We live in a democracy and opinions should be heard, but maybe the way that we speak about people in our democracy as well.
I want to get back to social media and YouTube broadcasting this and leaving it up for so long. I want to come back to that, but I've got so many more questions for you. So we have a wave of anti-Semitism happening in Australia now, which frightens the shit out of me. I've always said this, and Kelsey will tell you, I think we've got to be pretty strict on the people we invite to live in this country, and I don't want people living here who hate us, who hate democracy, and come here with problems that are deep-seated in where they've come from and bringing them here. They're bringing their baggage here. You're entitled to your opinion, you're entitled to, but once you start breaking our laws, that's where it's got to stop. It's one law for everybody. And yet this radicalisation is so deep-seated, it frightens me.
I will just sort of caveat that in saying that while anti-Semitism is a real problem in Australia today, police are still investigating as to the source of where those attacks are coming from. There's talks about organised crime involvement as well. But I think that your point absolutely stands, which is that in the internet age in particular, violence and political violence, the radicalisation towards political violence, no community is immune from it. Because so many of these spaces were invisible to us, and because particularly people, parents might not know the worlds that their kids are living in online, it's difficult to wake up to that and it's difficult to understand. But no community is immune to the threat of political violence, and no community is immune to people within their own ranks being radicalised towards violence. And, in many of these radicalisation structures sort of mirror each other, whether it be Islamist extremism, right-wing anti-immigration extremism. Many of them kind of mirror each other. They offer belonging, a idea of being part of something that's bigger than oneself. They even offer sort of a martyr complex to people that carry out the terrorism. You will be remembered, you will be admired by our communities. And so I think the key is that we've just got to be vigilant across this violence within all communities.
Do you think we would have this degree of radicalisation if we didn't have the internet? Because people write things, people read it, and their heads explode, and they repeat it. And I just want to remind you, and this is a bit before your time, but in 1978, the Hilton Hotel in Sydney in George Street was bombed. There's George Street one side, Pitt Street the other. And it was then argued that the people who did that, the two blokes that did it, were members of a sect called Anandamaga. And you can look into that if you want. And it was then argued that it was actually terrorism on our doorstep. And there was no internet. So that's radicalisation, isn't it? Without the help of the internet. Do you think the internet is making things worse?
Let me answer it like this. In the 1990s, there was this lifelong neo-Nazi, this bloke named James Mason, who'd been a big part of a whole bunch of American neo-Nazi books. He published a bunch of newsletters called Siege. They were then formed into a compilation, into a book. And he argued in Siege that neo-Nazi extremist terrorists, extremist groups, should do away with groups. They were too liable to split. They should do away with trying to organise in any coherent ways. It just wasn't working. And instead, we should encourage what he called one-man armies, single organised acts of violence. The problem with that in the 90s, well, firstly, he was in jail soon after he published the book because he'd been abusive to a teenage girlfriend that he'd had. Big thing of pedophilia in this Nazi world as well. It's often seems to be the case, or it rears its head in a bunch of these stories. But more importantly, the problem that he had was that he, in the 90s, before the internet, in order to create this sort of one-man armies, you needed groups to disseminate material. You needed groups to attract people in to become part of something.
Exactly.
James Mason's vision didn't go anywhere until it was picked up on these spaces on the internet in 2013, 14, 15, right in the years before the Christchurch terrorist was being radicalised. Websites, that people had no idea existed, places called Iron March, for example, that people didn't even know, transnational neo-Nazi networks that they worked out. Actually, no, now we can radicalise people without them even needing to leave their bedrooms.
Yeah.
And so I think, in answer to your question, it's unquestionably the internet has made people be able to be radicalized in ways that Nazis of the 80s and 90s would only have dreamt of.
Yeah. So it's not just putting fuel on a fire of hatred, but then it goes out further and further, and more people are ignited by it. I mean, you look at neo-Nazis and people who hold the thoughts of Adolf Hitler so near and dear to their hearts. I mean, Mein Kampf was a book that people hang on to, but now because of the internet, those philosophies are spread even further because it's got a bigger footprint now. Do you think that Australia is struggling to come to terms that a radicalised Muslim, for example, or a terrorist doesn't necessarily have a beard and dark skin and come from the Middle East?
That are radicalized non-Muslim, you mean? Yeah. I think absolutely. I think that was part of the problem, right? Is that we'd had a kind of clear idea in Australia about what a terrorist looks like, right? And that was because of because there was a real threat of Islamist extremism in the lead up to Christchurch, certainly since 9/11. And we didn't really engage with the fact that there were actually a lot of white guys that were going down parallel radicalization pipelines on the internet and falling into extremist ideologies that kind of mirrored Islamist extremist ideologies and committing acts of terror, just like what we happened in Christchurch.
Just about every religion believes their religion's the only one. And even Christians will tell you if you don't accept Jesus Christ, you're going to hell. Or if unless you accept Jesus, you're wrong.
Sure. And I think we're talking about these huge religions that are observed by billions of people, really billions of people all around the world. And with both Christianity and Islam, what it means to be Muslim in Indonesia would be very different to what it might mean to be Muslim in somewhere like Saudi Arabia. Absolutely. And likewise with Christianity, what it means to be a Christian in the deep south of America might mean something very different to if you go to an Anglican church, on the North Shore of Sydney or something. And I think, religion, if it gives people meaning and it allows people to feel connected to something, spiritual guidance in their life, that's a beautiful thing, and that should be protected. The problem is when religious thought is used, of any kind, is used and abused by people to turn particularly vulnerable young people towards violence.
Yes, towards violence and breaking the law.
You know, that's the problem. And, you know, I've never gone particularly deep on Islam or really any religious ideology. I'm not personally hugely gifted with faith, so I haven't really, you know, unfortunately. But you know, I've got Christians in my family, and I absolutely love that for them. I've got Muslim friends, you know, who are some of the best people in the world, very, very close to me. You know, they're
not radicalised.
They're not radicalised. It's not, you know.
I feel very, very deeply sorry for the peace-loving Muslims who wouldn't hurt anybody. They have their faith, but they're not going to go and kill someone who doesn't agree with it. I feel sorry for them. I feel worried that they're being tarred with this radicalised Islamic behaviour, and they're not part of it at all. I feel really bad about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And much like with Christchurch, I think that going back to your question before about were we willing to contend with the fact that, you know, this white guy would carry out something like that within sort of white communities. People don't think like that. It's sort of unimaginable. So that people would be driven to such extreme racism like that. And I think it was the same thing with a lot of Muslim communities. It's like they were, you know, when stuff like that happened, the vast majority of Muslims were
horrified.
Had no idea that people, because it just was beyond their imagination that people from within their same community would carry out something like that, because it's not part of anything that they stand for and they believe it. And I think the same thing, you know, for people in Grafton, for example, and I feel for the people of Grafton, because they were hounded with journalists who were trying to look for answers, because people thought the answers must lie in Grafton for why this had happened. And many people in Grafton, this sort of crazy societal collapse, race war, neo-Nazi stuff, it was completely obscure to them. They had no idea that this ideology existed, let alone that it would be connected to their town. And so, you know, I think you sort of see similar things going on there.
Yeah, it worries me that there's more Brenton Tarrants out there, white Australians brought up in regional Australia, and they're out there and they're ticking time bombs. Are you confident since 2019 Christchurch that the holes have been closed up, or at least some of them?
I hope so. But the problem is, Luke, that these communities, the people out there that are trying to radicalise people like Brenton Tarrant towards violence, they're very agile and they move very quickly. And it's easy when things are changing so quickly for intelligence agencies to become reactive. So we don't know what goes on, but we hope.
You'd hope we've learned some lessons.
Absolutely, and I believe there are good people out there doing good things who are aware of this threat, and that, you know, things will be prevented. And it is my sincere hope that we will never see anything like what happened in Christchurch happen again.
Yeah, I'd like to know your opinion on the responsibility of social media platforms allowing this to be broadcast live for so long. Do they have to accept some responsibility on this?
It's a nightmare question, Luke. It's a very important one, but it is a nightmare question, because the issue with social media platforms is that often, because these groups are so agile, if one place gets shut down, they'll just move to another one. In saying that, we do know a lot about, you know, Facebook, for example, that in the years leading up to Christchurch, they weren't taking their corporate responsibility, their corporate responsibility particularly seriously.
Still accepting ads, though.
Sure, still accepting ads, and that even though these are difficult questions to answer about when you navigate, you know, what's hate speech and what's free speech in these parts of the internet, that there was a real attitude of attention at all costs, to the detriment of society, people's mental health, all this sort of stuff as well. So it's a difficult question to weigh in on, but certainly I think things could have been handled more maturely and more responsibly, particularly in those early years, 2014, 2015, 2016.
Yep. And there'd be plenty of bleeding hearts and academics that would argue for someone to go and do that, kill 51 people while broadcasting it, surely there's a plea for mental health there.
100%. But yeah, in this case, No, that wasn't the case. I mean, one of his first lawyer that had gone in to visit him gave a statement to the media, which he was later fined for because he wasn't allowed to speak to the media, but basically saying he was completely lucid and completely rational within his own world. He wasn't.
Jesus,
this wasn't a case of mental health. This wasn't a case of psychosis. This was a case of a guy who had found communities online that had radicalized each other, desensitized each other towards extremist violence.
A very high-profile person I work with in the media was telling me that she came home, went to see what her young boy was doing, and he said, "Mum, look at this. There's a bloke killing people in New Zealand," and he was watching it live, but he wasn't upset. He said, "Hey, Mum, you got to check this out." It was almost as if it was nothing because he'd become so desensitized by the violence that you see every day. He was watching this on YouTube and he wasn't horrified. Mum, you should see this. He said, "Oh, Mum, you've got to check this out."
It is really scary. I don't know if you manage. There's a new Netflix series, now a couple of months old, called Adolescence, which is about an ideology called incel ideology, which is slightly different to this one, but it's an amazing story, really about a family, and it begins with the arrest of their young son, 13-year-old boy who's carried out a murder against one of his female colleagues at school, and the family reckoning with that because they had no idea the online worlds that he was living in. And that's very common and very, very scary. It's
another topic for another day. The firewalls can be beaten, and where there's a will, there's a way, and kids can watch whatever they want, whether we like it or not. And I keep saying, it's up to parents and grandparents to educate themselves. But I mean, gee whiz, if you want something bad enough, you'll find it. Joey, are you, after all that research, are you maybe a little more confident that this can't happen again?
Luke, honestly, not entirely. Just because I see how quickly these things change and how adaptable these groups are and how tactical they are in terms of wanting to create things like what happened in Christchurch. And so while I really, in my heart hope that it doesn't happen again, I think if there's one lesson that I took from my reporting, it's that the threat is real and that we need to be vigilant.
Joey Watson, it's fascinating and frightening. I just hope that our security forces, with all the intelligence and technology that they have, are keeping a closer eye on things. It's a new podcast. It's called Secrets We Keep, Lone Actor. And all the episodes are on the Listener app right now. Joey Watson, fascinating yet frightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Going through my head like a jet plane, going with the lights on, turns out it started with a fight tonight.
Coming up, former New South Wales Minister for just about everything, David Elliot, a fascinating character. One of the great things about the Bonafide podcast with me, Luke Boner, is I get to talk to people that I enjoy talking to, people who have strong opinions on everything, people who have had experience in just about everything, and people who are willing to listen as well. I often say on this podcast, I don't tell you what to think. I just like to be able to give you things to think about. And that's my next guest, who has been a mate for a long, long time, Minister for everything. He's now retired politician, but he's just done everything. And that is David Elliot, who is a former politician. He served as a New South Wales Minister for Transport, Minister for Veterans. He's been Minister for Police, Emergency Services. The list goes on and on and on. And he's strongly opinionated, but he gives you a lot to think about. And that's why I like him. And he's with us now. Welcome to your first appearance. It might be your last appearance. You might punt me after this. But welcome to your first appearance on Bonafide with me, Luke Boner. And in the other corner, the millennial is Kelsey, who puts this all together, and she chimes in from time to time. with great opinions. So welcome to the family, David Elliot.
Well, thanks for having me, Luke. It's a pleasure.
You and I have spoken a lot over the years. And even when you retired, you and I kept sending messages to each other on topics because I just wanted to hear where your head was on certain things. So now I've got you. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on here in Australia. I spoke to David Littleproud recently, the leader of the Nats, about where he thinks the country's going. He was really frank in what's wrong with the coalition, his thoughts on Jacinta Price jumping ship, the problems facing regional and rural Australia, because he's passionate about regional Australia. He's a Queenslander through and through, and you're a New South Welshman through and through. And as I said, you've got lots of opinions and lots of things. So what's floating your boat at the moment? Do you miss the cut and thrust of politics? Because you were in there for quite some time and you were Minister for Counter-Terrorism.
Yeah.
Minister for Corrections.
Yeah.
You were in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
You were Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
What haven't you done?
Yeah, I often joke to people, I've got to work out what I'm going to do when I grow up, because I've been very, very lucky. I've been very, very lucky. I've always been able to do jobs that have either inspired me or they have motivated me. Many of them have just been a great honour. I mean, I think probably the greatest professional honour in my life was being called to be an Australian Army peacekeeper overseas, where I served in Bougainville in 2000. And then, of course, a dream comes true when you're called up by your party to be a member of parliament, then a member of cabinet. But it's been an exciting journey, and now I've got this nice part of my life where I'm working for a board of very, very intelligent men and women. I love working in the engineering fraternity. It's the second time I've taken a chief executive's role in the engineering fraternity. Before I entered Parliament, I was the CEO of the civil contractors. So now, being in the similar space, working for, I've got a woman on my board she's in her mid-30s with a PhD in engineering, and just very, very intelligent people, and of course they're loving the media side. Writing a column for the Telegraph and appearing 2GB and on Sky Television, being able to provide some commentary and reflections and experience. And I'm also on a couple of boards as well. So it's been a nice transition. To answer your question, do I miss it? There are lots of things I miss about politics. There are lots of things that I don't miss about politics. I loved being a local member of parliament. I loved the parish pump stuff. I loved going to school presentations, and I loved hosting morning teas for community volunteers. And when my seat got abolished the last election, which basically, it's God's way of telling you that your political career is finished, I do miss that. I mean, of course, seeing your party lose government is not an easy thing to do, but it was probably made a little bit more bearable for me because I was leaving anyway, and I wanted to make sure that you want to make sure that your legacy doesn't get destroyed, though, and I don't think that's been done at the moment. But it is a time for my party to reflect as well. So maybe I can assist in that regard better by not being in the parliamentary party.
Well, there's so much I want to talk to you about concerning directly with the portfolios that you held, and I don't know if we're going to have enough time today. And the reason I wanted to get you on my podcast was so that we had time to talk about you, but there's too much. So how about we go through it bit by bit? Can we talk about your time in the Army? You joined the Australian Army and commenced officer training at Royal Military College at Duntroon back in 1995.
Yeah.
And you attained the rank of captain back in 1997. You took 18 months leave and you worked as a press secretary for Peter Collins. Now, can I tell you this, just a few degrees of separation here. I used to know Peter Collins really, really well, and we've lost touch and we need to catch up. Peter and I have the same birthday, 10th of May. And there was a Bathurst connection because his sister Elizabeth lived in Bathurst. And a mate of mine who used to own a pub, David Berry, became the state member for Bathurst. And so, therefore, Peter used to visit the electorate a lot to visit family, his mum and his sister. And then he and I would catch up and we became friends instantly. we became friends instantly. So I was interested to hear that you worked really closely with him. And I remember when Peter released his book, he invited me to Parliament House in Macquarie Street for the launch of that. I was down in the Bear Pit that day. I remember Mike Carlton emceed it. Do you remember that?
Yep, I do.
So I was there that day, and I didn't know you then, and I wish I had, but we might have spent the whole afternoon getting into trouble up at the Bourbon and Beefsteak or something afterwards. But can we talk about your time in the armed forces? Because that must have been an absolute eye-opener for you. Take us through that. Why did you want to join, and what was it like being an officer?
Boyhood ambition. My son's just now halfway through his officer training, and he's the 5th generation in my family to have joined the Australian Army at various levels, doing various things. I mean, we've got a great uncle who's buried on the Western Front. He was 19 years old when he was killed in the First World War. We've got a relative that's buried in Gallipoli.
Wow.
My cousin lost a leg in Cambodia. I've got my uncle served in the Transport Corps during the Vietnam War, although didn't get deployed to Vietnam. So it's kind of like a bit of a family tradition on both sides, funnily enough. But my father, who didn't serve, his brother did, but he didn't serve. He had instilled in me a very, very healthy preoccupation with Australian military history. So from a boy, from the earliest times of my memory, I wanted to be a soldier. And so when I got the opportunity to go to university, first person in my family to ever get to go to university, I did a degree in Australian history, and I thought, well, what do I do with this? And of course, that was at a time when Duntroon and ADFA was evolving, and because I didn't go to ADFA, I went to a civilian university. I could apply to go straight to Duntroon, which I did. But at the time, I was also working in and around media. So when I finally got my degree and got commissioned, they put me straight into the Army Public Relations. I thought I'd been smacked on the bum by a rainbow, because it really was. I mean, everybody in the Army says my job's the best job in the Army, unless, of course, you're in the military police. But I loved the idea of being an officer in the Army and going around and telling the Army story. So I used to go on patrols with the Special Forces. I used to go on exercises with the Special Forces. I used to go on, I'd go and watch the engineers blow up bridges. I'd take journalists to see the military prisons, and I got to see so much about the Army. And then they were very, very. It's a great institution if you want to learn. So they put me through my master's degree, and when I finished my master's degree, I literally got a phone call from the Army again to say, "Can you come back to full-time service, because there's a position as a peacekeeper at your rank and with your experience." So I packed my bags, got 6 days' notice to move. It took me 3 days to get the guts to tell my new bride that I was leaving home for 6 months. She thought it was an elaborate plan to get out of gardening. And
that's a pretty elaborate plan, though.
And so then I got the greatest honour of going over and spending 6 months peacekeeping in Bougainville with the multinational peacekeeping forces, and I came back, and it was very much a life-changing experience. There's not much. I mean, I love reading in the newspapers people that think that, particularly when I was a minister, they'd provide running commentary about you. It's one thing that fascinates you when you're in politics, when people you've never even met provide running commentary. But a couple of times people used to say, "Oh, yes, he's tenacious," which was the greatest compliment. I don't know if it was always meant to be a compliment. It was greatest because when you get back from peacekeeping in a third world country, and we lost a soldier over there. I was physically on a patrol to searching for the young soldier's body who was killed accidentally while I was peacekeeping there. And I mean, there's not much. When you go through an experience like that, missing your family, living under terrible conditions, observing a third world country which had been wrecked by a 10-year civil war, you come back to Australia and there's not much that upsets me anymore. I mean, I pretend I get upset about a lot of things, but there's not much that in Australia upsets me. But I'll tell you what it does do. It did focus on me how civilised Australia is. You want to go back to my engineering exposure at the moment. I mean, I look at these men and women at my board, and I move around the state visiting the state's engineering fraternity and responsible for their professional development as their RTO, the institute. If you ever want to appreciate Australian infrastructure, go to a third world country where you might need to go to get some food on the other side of a river and there's no bridge. Next time you spend a Saturday afternoon wandering around your neighbourhood, imagine what it would have been like if there was no usable road to go down to the shops to get milk. Imagine if there was no bridge that allowed you to get your kid to a doctor's appointment. Imagine if there and it's these
we take it for granted.
These simple things that made me learn when I was overseas what makes a country like Australia great.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. And nothing like travel makes you appreciate your country more. But just getting back to the ADF, over the years, and I'm only a spectator like most Australians, you watch what is handed to you by the TV station. And we heard about terrible accusations about sexual misconduct and bullying and hazing within the ADF. Did you witness any of that?
I personally didn't really. I saw bullying. I certainly saw bullying, particularly in my early younger days as an Army Reserve soldier. I saw bullying and I saw what we would call today bastardisation. But
like what? Give me an example. A typical example.
Like corporals bullying soldiers and majors bullying lieutenants and sergeants bullying corporals. I mean, it's an alpha male type institution, and at the time, yes, it did distress me, but unfortunately, we didn't think that there was anything we could do about it. Particularly if you were a victim to it. But I suppose if I'm also honest, I don't know if it was much different at varying levels and varying times to the police, or any different to, certainly no different to a construction site. I mean, if you want to see bullying, just talk to the CFMEU. So I think it's occurred. I think what we need to do is make sure that we have a workforce that is exposed to their rights, that what is and isn't acceptable in the workplace. But we also got to accept the fact that institutions like the Australian Defence Force, you're trained to do a job which is a lot more unique than if you were working in a retail outlet or if you were teaching in a school or something like that. So, in a normal office environment, if you don't say please and thank you, you can be chipped for it. You can say, well, can you show some common courtesy, and workplace etiquette says this. But when you're training a soldier for operations on a battlefield, you don't get the luxury of saying please. You don't get the luxury of questioning a request. You don't have the luxury of resitting some sort of a test or an exam because you haven't comprehended what's required of you. So we do have to give them a little bit of leeway, but we also need to make sure that the officers and the senior non-commissioned officers are aware of what is expected of them and know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And then we go a step, not more serious, but certainly that made international headlines, and that is accusations of criminal war crimes and criminal behaviour of some of our soldiers. And the highest decorated soldier, Ben Robert Smith, who, by the way, lost his appeal of defamation. I've spoken to people who know Ben Robert Smith and who have worked with him, and they say he's an absolutely outstanding bloke, and that I don't know how to put this, and you can maybe help me, David, the line that you cross when you're in the heat of battle, and you often wonder and you question what are the rules when you're facing an enemy that doesn't wear a uniform and that's willing to sacrifice 9, 10, 11-year-old kids and strap them in explosives and walk into an army compound, it's very hard to know where that line of decency is. I can't even imagine it. I can't comprehend it. What is a war crime when there doesn't seem to be any rules? I don't quite understand it. Can you shed some light on that?
Well, they do. Yeah, they call it the fog of war, and I think probably what and we get trained about ethics at Duntroon. It's a very, very important, delicate subject. And yes,
because Ben Roberts-Smith has now been declared a war criminal.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I haven't seen the evidence to the way that the Judge Advocate General of the Defence Forces been exposed to it. I am concerned about a few things about the Ben Roberts-Smith and others. First one is their senior commanders seem to have got away with murder, literally. They've literally been able to remove themselves from the chain of command. Now, I can tell you, when an officer cadet is trained by the Australian Defence Force, chain of command, command and control, command and communication is drilled into their brain as to what their obligations are. And in many respects, it reminds me of the ministerial code of conduct under the Westminster system. The buck stops with the minister. And ministers have to take responsibility and commanders as well. So the fact that we had an entire regiment being told that they were going to be stripped of their medals, even those that hadn't even been to the theatre of operations, the area of operations, says to me that there is no presence of natural justice. Now, thankfully, Peter Dutton reversed that decision and the soldiers were given their medals back, but the Chief of Defence Force at the time was carrying on as if he was some Middle Ages monarch who was going to strip the artillery unit of their colours because a gun got captured by the French. And it's just not the way. I just fail to understand why anybody thought that it was smart stripping soldiers who were not even in the area of operations of medals because of something that had been allegedly done by somebody else. I find it horrific that if Ben Roberts-Smith did exactly what he did, and I'm not saying he did or he didn't, but if he did what he did, how come his platoon sergeant and his platoon commander and his company commander weren't charged? Or at least why did they seem to think that it was okay to give somebody who allegedly did these horrific things a Victoria Cross? Because the Victoria Cross, the investigation and the probity check into Victoria Cross, they want to know your mother's bra size. I mean, these guys go through everything.
Yeah.
I also was very, very concerned about the trial by media. Journalists that would be quite happy to stand up and say, well, you can't offend this alleged bank robber, pedophile, insert offence, because they're innocent until proven guilty. But if you're Ben Roberts-Smith, he was guilty until proven innocent. And I think that created a lot of unnecessary political pressure on an outcome. And in my mind, it would have influenced decisions that had been made, both in the judiciary and within the military. So it is it's a very, very unfortunate, unsavoury example of what happens in modern warfare. But again, I fail to. They're all judgment calls, and at the end of the day, you've got to make a judgment call, and you've got to make sure that nothing that you get briefed about when it comes to rules of engagement are going to be black and white. Because as you alluded to just then, if a 12-year-old girl comes walking into the army compound strapped with bombs, and this happens, and you've been told you're not allowed to shoot civilians, well, I'm telling you, I think I'd probably, for the benefit of my platoon or my company, you'd probably have to shoot her. You'd probably have to put a bullet through her because she's going to blow up everybody.
Folks, let me tell you why I don't go into winter without power pollen. We all know how run down you can feel at this time of the year. Low energy, colds, and you just feel, Well, power pollen's been in my routine for for over 20 years. And you want to know why? It works, and it comes with a money-back guarantee. But it works. It's not just bee pollen. Nature Bee has this special process that makes it absorbable. It's called potentiation. Look it up. It means your body gets all that good stuff fast, more energy, better immunity, and a real lift when your battery's running low. So if you're staring down another long, cold season, give your body the fuel it needs. Do what I do. Head to the link in the show notes and grab yours today. Money back guarantee. Can I tell you a horrifying story? When I was on the radio at another network, a bloke rang me up one night when all this was happening. And I remember talking about the movie A Few Good Men, you know, with Tom Cruise, Demi Moore and Jack Nicholson and Kevin Bacon. It's the story of two young men who were accused of killing a bloke, what was his name? Lance Corporal Harold Dawson.
Yeah.
And Private First Class Loudon Downey and his friend were accused of killing him. And at the very end of the movie, you find out that the code red, the discipline that was dished out on this bloke, was actually ordered by the colonel in charge of the base at Guantanamo Bay, Jack Nicholson. They were under orders. They were only following orders, and yet they got a dishonourable discharge. And Jack Nicholson's character eventually is arrested. However, spoiler, sorry. I got a phone call from a guy, and he said he was in Afghanistan, and there was a young boy, 9 or 10, he reckoned. He was walking towards them with his robes on, and he had a couple of goats with him and a stick. And he was walking towards the Australian compound. And he got his binoculars out, and they're very, very powerful. And he could clearly see that he had explosives strapped to him. And he was walking towards the compound. And this soldier said to me, and I'll never forget it, in the dead of the night, I said, what did you do? He said, I shot him in the head. I said, you what? He said, I shot him. I'll never forget it.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned A Few Good Men, because at Duntroon, they actually play it to young officer cadets. I don't know if every class gets played it, but they actually played it to young officer cadets, and then you have to break into tutorial groups and talk about the ethical considerations of the movie. I think it's a fascinating story, and good luck. You know, thanks to Hollywood for being able to provide that in an easily digestible. That moral dilemma for soldiers in a very easily digestible manner, and it is fascinating. But it's the same. I mean, it's really just A Few Good Men is just a modern day Breaker Morant, really, isn't it? Because you could argue that the Breaker was charged for just following orders, and for those of the listeners who have watched that movie would be familiar with the perceived injustice. And, your connection with Bathurst would know how many times they've put Breaker Morant's name on and off that war memorial there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My dad joined the Army in 1945 when he turned 18. And 2 years he had to join National Service. And if it wasn't for 2 bombs being dropped on Japan, he was going to go to New Guinea. But the 2 years he spent in the Army stayed with him forever.
Yeah.
And he was not an army type bloke. He was a creative artist. But he made me and my sister get up at 5:30 every morning to do calisthenics. He was absolutely anal about the way we made our bed. Yep. And he used to get a 20-cent piece and flick it on the bed, and he'd want to be able to catch it in midair. We had to fold our socks so that they had smiley faces on them when we put them in our drawer. It stayed with him forever.
Yeah, I'm not as bad as that, but I do have my wife would tell you that I do have, she calls it my Downton Abbey DNA, but it's actually come from the military. And I'm one of these weird blokes. I can't have anybody iron for me. I have to iron my own shirts.
Oh, your wife would love that.
Yeah, because I got taught, and I say to her, she says, "Why aren't I good? Don't I iron good enough for you?" And I said, "Well, I've actually been taught how to iron," and she, there's always a blue on how much starch should be used on a shirt, but I'm not as bad as what your father is. But I do your father was. I do have to have the bed made in the morning. I can't leave the house unless
hospital corners.
Yeah, well, we cheat these days. We've got a doona, but
don't you love the doona? The doona's a great cheat. No, but
I'm fascinated because my youngest bloke, who is in officer training now, he was never as, let's just say, as disciplined as I was when it came to, getting up in the morning and making sure your bedroom was, but he seems to be nailing it.
There's more to talk about, but I can't leave this conversation without giving a plug to a charity that I'm an ambassador for, and that's Wounded Heroes. And we look after people who are doing it tough between the ears, who have seen service, men and women. So woundedheroes.org, please, if you can help anything, because Martin Shaw is a great bloke. It's completely non-for-profit. And we just do basic things like put someone who needs help in a motel for a night or two. We buy groceries, we help people who aren't coping, who have seen service overseas, and men and women, as I mentioned. I was amazed to hear from Martin Shaw that you've got people who have got these mental injuries, and he said that the ADF is the only public service in Australia where they don't have work cover.
Yeah, they kind of they're excluded from civilian work cover, but there are other, I think, better welfare opportunities that Defence offer you. I never felt that, certainly when I was peacekeeping, I never felt that I was exposed to issues that wouldn't be dealt with. It does come down, of course, to how good your commanders are, your sergeant is, or your commanding officer is. Remember, we don't have work cover, but we've got an entire medical corps. So
a lot of the people we deal with are getting no help at all, and Martin gets them through the red tape and the bureaucracy, but it is a shit fight. It is a shit fight for a lot of these people.
I'm a member of my RSL sub-branch. We've got a very, very good welfare officer. We've got a very, very good pensions officer. So but a lot of the guys disengage as well. And I remember when I was Veterans Minister, we were dealing with veteran homelessness, and there were just veterans who did not. We had vacant spots. We had accommodation available for homeless veterans, but they prefer to live under a bridge in Parramatta than take either the charity of RSL Life Care or the support of the government. Brad Hazzard, as the minister, provided me with ample resources.
Former member for Wakehurst.
He tremendous resources for veterans, but getting them through the door and to asking for help, and of course accepting the fact that they needed help, was so hard. Because they think that I survived 12 months in Afghanistan. It doesn't matter if I have to live under a bridge in Parramatta, because that's just the way that I roll.
It's sad. It is really, really sad. Just one more thing on defence, looking at it now from the outside and what's going on in the world now, and Australia's relationship with China and America. Yeah, we're trying to softly dance between the two. America hates China. China can't stand America. China's our number one trading partner. We desperately need America to stay on side for defence, and yet Trump is hammering us with tariffs. How important to Australia's defence and safety is our relationship with America?
Well, it goes back over 100 years. The first visit of the Great White Fleet before at the turn of the last century, it was proof that they had the firepower and we had the geographical advantage. First World War, it wasn't really until the Americans came onto the Western Front in 1917 that we were able to push the Germans back. Second World War, Battle of Coral Sea, was the beginning of the end of a long ending, but the beginning of the end for the Japanese advance into the Southwest Pacific. The Americans repelled the Chinese in the Korean Peninsula, and of course Vietnam is a stain on our military history, but luckily all is well. We can't walk away from a good friend that has saved us in the past, that shares, for all of his the criticism, and I've got plenty of it myself, the United States, led by Donald Trump, still is a nation that shares our democratic beliefs and our beliefs in the rule of law. But as I've said, I'm not one to justify or to defend Donald Trump. It's the last thing I'd do. But I do defend the American people, and I do defend that the institutions that they're built on are not much dissimilar to the institutions that have made Australia what it is today as well. So it is, and China. I mean, the mere fact that the Chinese government have responded to our Prime Minister by saying we will have, when he's raised concern that their ships were circumnavigated Australia for no reason whatsoever, and their response is, of course, we'll do what we like.
I mean, if it wasn't for a lone Virgin airline pilot, we wouldn't have known how close they actually were. That's appalling defence strategy on our part, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that's another reason why we need the United States. I also like the idea of the ongoing and strengthening of relationship with India. I don't think that we need to be taking that for granted anymore, and we have in the past taken it for granted. It's always been,
But then we're going to piss Pakistan off, which has nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but Pakistan doesn't have the democratic principles that India does. I'm not necessarily concerned about upsetting the Pakistanis. I think that's between India and Pakistan. Our concerns are, of course, on the eastern side of the subcontinent, and that includes North Korea and China.
Oh, absolutely. But let's just go. I wasn't meaning to go this deep into it, but I will now that you've mentioned it. The news at the time of the dropping of this episode is that now Donald Trump appears to have lost patience with Putin and is now threatening serious trade sanctions against Russia. And we saw how Donald Trump treated Vladimir Zelensky when he was in the White House in front of the world with all those cameras going. With him pleading for more help with Ukraine. I mean, that was the most appalling thing I've ever seen, and yet it was compelling to watch because we don't normally get to watch that shit, do we? What did you make of that?
I thought it was Trump. And, when what you see is what you get. And I don't think that anybody would be surprised. I'm horrified, yes, but not surprised. I mean, I don't think that, can you imagine if the Chinese president had spoken to Albanese like that yesterday? I think you'd find the Australian people would be horrified and disgusted and would probably demand some sort of apology or response. I God forbid, with the exception of a leader that we're legally at war with, I don't think that there's any way in the world that an Australian Prime Minister would treat face to face. Now, tragically, people like Kevin Rudd have spoken about world leaders that way.
I mean, I don't know how you deal with him, and Trump's tariffs. And now he's talking about, a 200% tariff. I wonder if it's just bluff. I mean, that's the way he does business, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of that. I think there is a lot of bravado there. And the problem is you can only do that once, but he doesn't care because he's not seeking a third term. What he's at risk of doing, in my mind, as a reader of history, is that he's going to spend the next 3 years creating a false economy because he's going to be putting all of these tariffs on imports, which means that American manufacturers and American businesses will get lazy and inefficient. And then when inevitably the next Republican or Democratic Prime Minister, and both of them will do it, they'll drop tariffs again. Well, then the American industries will just go bankrupt because they won't be able to compete with China and Japan and Bangladesh and any number of other nations, including Australia. I mean, their steel's not as good as ours. Their aluminium's not as good as ours. So if they put tariffs on our kit, on our products, and they get lazy, well, then in 3 years' time, when the tariffs are dropped by the next administration, well, guess what?
Look, we've got to come to a close soon, but I want to talk to you next time perhaps about corrective services, and there's a reason for that. Is our jail system designed for rehabilitation? I've always thought we have incarceration for three reasons. One, a deterrent for committing a crime. Geez, if I commit that crime, I might have to go behind bars. Two, a punishment. You've had your freedom taken away and you're treated as a number. But the third I've always thought was supposed to be rehabilitation. Do we do the third properly?
No, we don't. And your assessment just then was 100% correct. I had 4 years as the corrections minister. I think I'm the longest Liberal corrections minister the state's ever had. And I loved the portfolio. You'll be surprised to know that I had absolutely no exposure to it before I took on the responsibility. Unlike
you went in cold. You hadn't spent any time inside.
No, I hadn't. But there were two types of prisoners. There were the prisoner that should never be let out and the prisoner that shouldn't be there in the first place. And One of the early experiences that I had was going to a women's prison. I won't say where it was, but it was a women's prison. And I sat down with this lady who was an inmate, and she was immaculately groomed.
Yes.
Beautifully spoken, clearly educated. And we sat and had about a 20-minute conversation. And, for a minute there, I forgot that I was in jail just talking to a lovely lady that I'd met on the street. And I remember walking out and I said, oh, she's a, bizarre person to be found in a prison. And what did she do? And the governor of the jail said to me, oh, no, she murdered her husband. Right. And I thought, oh, okay. Anyway, it turns out that she murdered him because he'd been raping and abusing her for years and years and years, and she just had enough.
Jesus, she snapped.
And I thought, well, who's the victim there? So to answer your question, for the 50% of the people that shouldn't be there and should probably and need to be rehabilitated as a means of them getting early parole or appealing a decision, we don't. The reality is we just don't. And unfortunately, the prison population is on the increase again at the moment. It was on the increase under me 10 years ago. We had a prison building capacity program, and we had triple ups. We had 3 people in rooms that were meant for 1. But no, we don't do rehabilitation as well as we should. It's certainly something, if I was ever to go back into politics, it's certainly something that I would want to pursue reasonably fiercely. And I think what we need to do is get back to why people are going into prison and how can we make sure that they don't come back, because the figures of reoffending and returning to prison are just outrageous.
Let me tell you a quick story, David Elliot. I used to be friends with the governor of Lithgow Jail, John O'Shea, and I've been invited into. I haven't been sent to. I've been as a media observer, been invited into a few jails, AMC in Canberra, Bathurst, and Lithgow. And I went into Lithgow as a guest of former Governor John O'Shea. And he said, Luke, I'd really like you to talk to this one particular Indigenous prisoner we've got here. He's in his very, very early 20s, and I think he's going to end up being a career customer. And he's got me very worried, but he's a really nice kid, and he's got a good heart, and you should see his artwork. And maybe you could just have a chat to him for me, because he listens to you on the radio. And I said, I'm delighted. And I met this kid. How old was he? 20. 19 or 20. And we got talking, and we had a biscuit and a cup of tea. And he said that he'd been in trouble ever since he was a kid. And so had all his cousins and his brothers and his family. And he made parole and was released, and then was back a reoffender. And the figures surrounding reoffending incarcerated Indigenous people here in Australia is way too high. But maybe you and I can talk about that another day. So, and I said, what's going on? And he said, the system has set me up to fail. And I said, how? He said, well, when I made parole, I could not associate with anyone with a criminal record. I couldn't go within 100 metres of anywhere that sold alcohol. And he said, all my cousins and 3 of my brothers have all got criminal records. He said, I live in Moree. There's a pub every 50 metres. And he said, I just felt as though I was set up for fail. Now, that could be an excuse, but it was gee whiz, it was an interesting couple of hours, Dave.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's an excuse. I mean, and, you know, we had problems with kids getting done for driving offences, but that was because they couldn't get their licence because they couldn't get their hands on a birth certificate. And they certainly, I remember going out to Dubbo once to visit the youth detention centre out there on Christmas Eve. My wife and I used to try to visit a juvenile detention centre on Christmas Eve to check on the kids' welfare, and then every Christmas Day I'd go to a jail and cook barbecue breakfast for the inmates, for the officers that were working on Christmas Day. A bit of a family tradition, but I remember going out one Christmas Eve to Dubbo, and I was talking to this young kid, and I said to him, when did you come in, and how long are you going to be here for? And he said, I came in yesterday and I'm going to be here for 3 months. And I said, that's a shame, you've got to come in for Christmas. And he said, no, this is the best place to have Christmas. I get a present, the chaplain comes and does, we sing Christmas carols and we get a hot meal, because this young kid, if he'd been at home, his father would have got drunk, his mother would have bashed him, there would have been all sorts of... So it was literally, for this 16-year-old kid, he was better off in jail for Christmas than he was in his own family, with his own family. And you just want to hug them, and I
Jesus.
Years and years and years,
Jesus.
You felt guilty. I mean, I felt guilty when I still feel guilty at Christmas when I think about soldiers that... are on military operations, when I'm sitting there with my fat bum on the table, in the chair having a cold beer and a hot ham. But you also think about these poor kids that are better off in jail than they are with their own families.
That's so wrong.
And that's what we need. I mean, my view was, as Minister, 4 years as Minister for Juvenile Justice, if you want a kid to succeed in Australian society, you've got 3 things to give them. You've got to give them 3 meals a day. They can't have McDonald's. They've got to have them 3 decent, balanced diet. You've got to love them enough to tell them no. And, there are too many families out there and guardians and the state, they won't say no. If a kid's going down the wrong path, you've got to love them enough to say no and risk the fact that they're going to dislike you. And you've got to give them lots of organised activities. Now, for some bizarre reason, even though they had a father who spent more time in Parliament than at home, my 2 have turned out okay. They both finished university. One's in the banking sector and one's looking down the barrel of a military career. But, mate, we never let them sit still for an hour. They were at cadets. They were at youth group. They were at soccer. They were at rugby. You've got to give them as many organised activities as you can physically do, and they don't have to be costly. There are plenty of cheap, if not free, youth activities for you to do through church, through army cadets, through school, whatever. But it's your kid up at Moree, I bet you he was not involved in any organised activity, which is why the police citizens youth clubs are so important in regional New South Wales and in Western Sydney.
I've spoken to the boss of Hard Yakka, the one I'm talking about, the boot camp in Queensland.
Yep.
And it's hard love.
Yep.
But he has over a 90% success rate.
Yep.
And deals with a lot of Indigenous kids.
Yep.
And he takes the chip off the shoulder and puts pride in their heart.
Yep.
But he gets virtually no funding at all. It's all donations.
Yeah, and it can be expensive. I know a kid who got sent off to a program like that. He was a tearaway kid, nice middle-class family, but tearaway kid. And now he's the most delightful kid young man working in banking, put himself through university, and it worked. And I tell you, I dropped the juvenile incarceration rate significantly when I was minister, because we put lots of money into diversion programs. The whole focus was on. We ended up closing Dubbo Juvenile Detention Centre because there was no demand for it, but we were putting kids through a record number of diversion programs.
Yeah, I tell you what. How about next time, or one of the future times you come on my podcast? Why don't we get Bob Davis back, who runs Hard Yakka, and you guys can have a chat as well? Would you like to do that?
Yeah, of course. I'd love to.
Yeah, because we've got to do something. I'll just give you a quick example that I saw firsthand, and I've got many of them. Talking of Dubbo, where I have family, my daughter went to stay with some relatives, some blood relatives in Dubbo. Now, I'm going to try very hard not to identify this person, but can I just say it was a very close relative? And Holly was 14, and I rang up this close relative on her mobile to see how's it going. What you get up to today? And she said, Shane, because they call me Shane. I was born Shane Wilson,
right?
And then I was adopted, but they all call me Shane. Shane, hey, I can't talk too much now. Holly's driving. I said, what? She said, yeah, she's driving. She's loving it. I said, she's 14. Yeah. I said, my daughter is not she's just driving back from town back out to where she lived, which was 15 minutes out of town. I said, she's not to drive. She's not licensed. She's 14. And you know what she said to me? This close relative? Shane, that's white man's law.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
It's another conversation for another day. We've got 8 portfolios to get through. We've only just touched on 1.5. You're a fascinating bloke, 8 portfolios, and you made a difference in each and every one. And you are a genuine, compassionate human, and you never stop moving. He's an interesting character, David Elliot. 8 portfolios, and we're going to get through each and every one of them because it's fascinating. And next up, the ever-ready, ever-moving Rocket Rod and Truckee Tuesday.
Got your diesel running. Head out on the highway. Missing all the roadkill. Another Truckee Tuesday. In the gate when you're changing from lanes. Do not brake check me in my prime. Australia moves and it's thanks to you guys. Trucks to get there on time. Listen to the air horns. Dip your lights from high beam. HPL that help you. Thanks to Rock and a Food. On the highway driving all day. And at night when the traffic's slow. Getting goods from state across lines. We're ready to go. Without trucks, Australia stops. They're driving around the clock. Never give it up. Drive safe tonight. Drive left-hand side.
Time for Truckee Tuesday, the Lord of the Highway, the hero of the highway, I should say. It's always good to get a little bit of alliteration in there. Rocket Rod Hannafy. G'day, buddy.
G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm good. You back in Dubbo?
I am, mate. Yes. Visiting. Got home yesterday, leaving tomorrow to go to Melbourne.
And does your wife and your family, do they recognise you yet?
The dog didn't bite me, although I didn't go out in the dark. And the others do. We do talk a little bit on the phone. It's been a bad week for phone. I've been in a different truck. That's a whole issue. Mine is having major surgery.
Well, hang on. Let's start with the truck. What's happened?
Well, it got to 710,000 kilometres, and a couple of the blokes said to me, he said, how many Ks on that now? It's going well. And I said, yes. And I got home last weekend, and it had spat some coolant out. I'd smelt coolant driving along, and I stopped and couldn't find anything. And I got back, and one of the blokes says, it sounds like it might have dropped a liner. So I came home, went to start it Monday, and it wouldn't start. And it's called compression lock. It actually allows water to seep into one of the cylinders, and then when you go to start it, it can't compress the water, and it won't start. got it started, got it to work. They made some phone calls. And the day really turned to shit from there because I was going to get in another truck and I started cleaning it and the driver had taken the keys and then they said, no, hold it, no, you got to change all that. This other driver's hurt his back, now you got to go and take his truck. And we delivered my truck to Orange and I got it over there for the rebuild and they said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm here for an engine rebuild. Oh, nobody told us. So more phone calls and backwards and forwards and then back to pick up the other driver's truck and I've been in another combination for the week and they're saying that mine needs a rebuild and it seems to be about that 600,000 to 700,000 K. In the past they have done better at times, but this is one of the early Euro 6s, so we'll see what happens once they've done all their testing and digging and diving, and because it's under warranty, it had $1 million K warranty. It'll be done by Cummins under warranty, but we'll see how long it's going to be and what they're going to do.
When you said it was spitting a bit of coolant, my ears triggered. I'm getting away from trucks, but as you know, I drive a naturally aspirated V8, and I wanted the naturally aspirated V8, not the bi-turbo V8, which is in later models. I didn't want the turbo stuff, and they have problems. I wanted the uncomplicated 6.2 V8. However, to find one with very, very low Ks was difficult, and I had to find one that had the new and improved Mercedes head bolts, because the earlier models had these head bolts and the top nuts would just come off or they wear away, and the first sign of faulty head bolts on an ML is coolant.
Yes.
And so that's why my ears pricked up. Luckily, I searched and waited and found one with the new and improved head bolts. But that's why my ears pricked up.
Yes, well, you couldn't pick it up on the dipstick, and our bloke said, no, you won't there. And ours have another filler hole at the front of the engine at the bottom, because I've got a big cab, so my filler stack's at the back. It's the dipstick would probably have to be a metre and a bit long to reach the bottom of the sump. And we lifted the cab up and it was, creamy in that inside. And he said, that's water in the oil, but you could only see it down that far. The truck that I'm in now actually had its go at 600 and something, so it's already had a rebuild. And our coolant is sort of has a noticeable smell, and I could just smell it driving along, and I thought, no, something's wrong here. And I got out, looked, couldn't find anything because it hadn't sort of reached the ground.
Yeah. Now, while we're all up at stupid o'clock, can we just talk about how rats always seem to wait until the middle of the night to make their move? You're finally drifting off after a long shift, and then they're doing laps in your roof and behind your walls as if it's Bathurst. Now, we've been using the Pestrol rodent-free Max for many years now. I've known Andrew Fennell, the owner of Pestrol, for 20 years. And all you do is you plug the thing in, bang, eviction notice served on rats and mice. And there's no blood, there's no guts, no traps, just science doing its job while you sleep like a log. And because I know you're thinking, yes, it's safe for pets, safe for the kids, and it runs 24/7, so you don't have to. It's $139. It comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee and a 2-year warranty, which is longer than half the appliances in my kitchen. Get it at Pestrol, Pestrol, pestrol.com.au, or call 1-800-338888, 1-800-338888, and tell them I sent you. Links are in the show notes.
But I have a question for you, Luke.
Okay, here is Rocket Rod's question of the week.
Okay, what looks like a road train, has the combined parts of a road train, and drives like a road train, but isn't a road train?
And you'll answer that next week. So
no, I'll answer that this week.
All right, go.
Because I was actually in a site loading during the week.
I thought you were going to leave us in a bit of suspense. I thought that's a good hook. We can encourage people to leave emails and leave voice messages. No, you're getting it over with now.
Well, you want to do that? All right. Well, let's. No, I haven't given you the answer yet. So
okay. No, don't.
I was at a site. No, I won't. But I was at a site, and the bloke said to me, "Oh, we thought you could explain this." And that's the two reasons for this question. One is they didn't understand how things were described. And the other is that I've been in such a combination all week.
All right. Now, if you think you know what Rocket Rod's talking about, leave us a message, lukebonerradioguy@gmail.com, or leave us a voice message and we'll come up with a prize for the first correct, because they might all get it right. All right.
Oh, there'll be a few truckies, Will.
Okay, well, let's see what happens. Rocket Rod, you know how we often talk about should there be a separate licence for caravan as well? When I was on the drive, I was presenting the drive program on Sydney's 2GB the last couple of weeks, and of course, the last Friday I was on was the end of school holidays, and people coming back down the highways. And I was saying, look, just be patient with slower cars, slower vehicles, and especially caravans. And the whole caravan topic came up again. And so I brought it up on the radio. I said, well, should there be a separate license for caravans, or should caravanners from now, you pick a date from now, have to do some sort of a course so that they learn the ins and outs of how to tow, how to maneuver, how to load it, all those sort of things before you buy a caravan, something bigger and longer than you've ever driven before, and off you go on the freeway. And I got this really interesting phone call from a woman who bought a caravan, and she thought to herself, I'm going to need a course. I want, for my own peace of mind and education, I want to do a specific caravan towing course. And she did one.
Yep.
And it cost $800, but she doesn't believe it was good enough, thorough enough, and she believes it was $800 wasted. Can I play it for you?
Absolutely.
Let's pull it up.
Well, my husband and I own a caravan.
Yes.
And we are one of the grey nomads that hit the road.
Yeah.
And to be on the safe side, we decided to go and do a caravan towing course.
You decided you needed it.
Yes.
Good on you.
Absolutely.
And tell me,
Absolutely.
I've got so many questions. How much was the course? How long did it run? What did it teach you?
Ran for a day for both of us.
Yes.
It cost $830 for both of us to go.
800, so 400 each.
Well, it doesn't matter whether it's one or two. It's 800.
It's 800.
It cost us
Okay.
$830 for the day.
Yes.
Yep. The first half of the day was spent on the safety of your caravan, hooking it up, your lights, your brakes, all of the safety features to do with your van. They talked about packing, weights and things like that. As far as learning how to tow and drive a caravan, nothing.
That is...
I was very disappointed that I walked away with a certificate to say that I can tow a caravan. However, I never hit the road. I did not have an instructor take me on the road and say to me, this is how you go around a roundabout when you're towing something as large as a caravan. You know, when you're going around a corner, even how much room you needed to drive forward before you swung the caravan. I did learn to back it into a spot for camping.
Yes.
But my actual safety on the road, I walked away feeling that...
a little shortchanged. So $800, and you would have loved to have gone for a drive with your instructor, and you're 100%. How to handle a roundabout, how to park it, how to reverse park it.
I can do that. I can reverse park it. I did that in a car park several times.
Wow, good on you.
However, I didn't get on the road, which
you found
was
disappointing.
Under the impression that I was going to. It was held at the Equestrian Centre at Hoxton Park, and there's roundabouts in there. There are stop signs. There are all sorts of things that I envisaged we would drive through.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I backed it. I got in the car and did a circle. They showed you how to not jackknife it.
Yes.
Which was basically driving in a circle one way and then putting the car in reverse and going the other way.
Yes.
And I went around a cone, which I knocked over.
But you didn't get out on the road. So I'm getting the impression you don't think it was $800 well spent.
Oh, absolutely not.
Wow.
Absolutely not.
Sue, thank you so much for your call. That is so interesting. What do you make of that, Rod?
Mate, it's a little bit like the licence thing, isn't it, in a way? Just having a licence doesn't give you all the skills you need for a combination. We've discussed that. Good that she made the effort to go and do it. Bad that it didn't include some of that on the road. But as of last night, I was only looking up a post that came up. There was, look, and we're not picking on Isuzu because other vehicles have the same problem, but there's an Isuzu with a rated supposed towing capacity of 3.5 tonne. Was being driven down the highway. Another fella came on it with an accident. The thing was hanging over the Armco, nearly into a creek. The van's fully on its side across the road, completely blocked the highway for many hours. It wasn't the only one. There'd been one the week prior in a similar area, and they sort of asked, how does this happen? And part of it is the fact that, you know, when you buy, whether it's a tow vehicle or a caravan, or you take it home and load it to the gunnels with all that you need, the rated towing capacity of the vehicle is probably over-exaggerated or made to be as big as it can, whether it can tow it safely or not. The weight of the van is generally not accurate. Certainly, you know, you've got to check the tear weight when you buy it to make sure, and some of them now are providing a certificate of authenticity that you guarantee what you are getting is what it says on the plate. Unless you go and weigh it, you don't know any different. Then you load all your clothes and your cutlery and your food and your grog and everything else in the caravan. Few people then weigh it. And once you hit the highway, and where that lady's saying she's disappointed she didn't go and do it, if anybody does those courses, obviously it's no good taking the empty van out. You've got to have everything in it before you go and see what it feels like.
Yeah.
And many years ago, I had a bloke who, you know, went to buy his van and he had a drop sheet. And the caravan salesman said, "What's that for?" He said, "Oh, I want to look underneath." "Oh, there's nothing under there." Well, he disagreed vehemently and he said, "Mate, I'm an engineer and I know that I'm going to have a look underneath because there have been so many vans sold and no one's perfect. Someone makes a mistake. They don't do a weld properly. You don't look for it. You get out in the highway. You've got 2.5 tonnes swinging behind a car, and that's what it is. It is swinging on that tow ball, and as soon as you hit a gust, and look, some people have been lucky. They've got to that point and it's just started to sway that little bit, and they've been given the advice, if they have trailer brakes fitted, and you're supposed to have electric brakes above a certain weight. I think it's 750 kilos, Luke, but I don't tow one, so we'll have to check that. But the electric brakes, some of them are automatically activated. Some of them you have a handpiece, much like we do in a truck.
Right.
And if the van starts to sway and you simply put your foot on the brake, or you've been told by someone else, oh, you just accelerate out of it, well, of course, then it means you're going faster when it swings side to side and you go off the road in a big screaming heap. But it seems the best advice is that you pull the trailer brake on gently, and that pulls it backward, and you've got to accelerate that tiny little bit against the brake. That straightens the combination and you can slow safely. But I don't know whether you've ever seen it, Luke, and I can go back many years. I was travelling out of Brisbane. There was a bloke in a Statesman. So we're talking about a fairly big car of the time.
Yes.
He was towing a caravan.
Yes.
He was on the Ipswich motorway, and I watched the van start to sway, and it just got worse and worse and worse until the van was fully perpendicular across 2 lanes of highway, and it shot the Statesman straight out to the left-hand side into the scrub. Now, he was lucky it stayed on its wheels, but as I say, this incident that was reported through one of the sites that I look at, the vehicle was upside down, the tow vehicle is upside down over an Armco, and the van is on its side crossing the highway. So once it's made a comment from there, everybody says, well, it was going so well until. And it could simply be a bump in the road. It could simply be, a deformity. And I've got to say, Luke, during the week driving that combination, this is one of these things where I ring up and get roads fixed. And I did ring TMR and put in a complaint about the St George bypass. There's a couple of big holes there. I rang them about a fire coming into Miles, and they said, "Oh, can you ring the fireys as well?" Because the tree had, through a fire on the side of the road, collapsed across the highway. Someone had hit it in a car, they'd have got more than a fright, they'd have probably wrecked their car. So I did do those things, but there are so many bits of road where the road is not broken. It's deformed, it's subsided, it's proud, it's damaged. And when you ring and they say, "Oh, but it's not broken, so we're not going to fix it." And that's something we have to address in the longer term, Luke.
But I was interested to hear her say it cost $840
for the day.
For the day. And it sounds like, explaining how to tow, how to hook up, how to balance, how to stay. That's all good, but she's disappointed that they didn't get out on the road.
Yes. And she's obviously got the combination there. She said she backed it in, so they're using your own combination. That's the best thing. It's no good getting in somebody else's van and going for a drive because they're all different. The tow vehicle, the way you set it up, the hitch that you've got supplied, every single one of those factors can make a difference to how it operates on the highway. And getting back to what you said about the licence, I've raised this 4 or 5 times. They all say, "Oh, well, I've driven my van for 40 years around Australia and I don't need a licence." And they might not, but there's someone who's made the effort and thought this is something new. I need the information. Yep, and then didn't get what she needed and what she felt was fair and reasonable. Now, you've got that area set up. You've got an instructor for the day. Like, he's doing all right out of it by the sound of it. He's probably only doing one couple, or whether it's a single person who goes and buys a van or the couple. So both are allowed there. There's no extra cost for a second person. But for that amount of money for the day, and the fact that she's disappointed, who then decides that is an accepted caravan course? So if we're going to have a licensing proposal, and we know they're going to say, "I don't need one, but you need it for everything else," and do we want more accidents on the highway because people are not taught and learn by mistake? And that can be, "Oh goodness, I managed to pull the trailer brakes on and now I know it's a bit heavy or it's not right." And we did discuss many ages ago, Luke, there is a little photo on Facebook of a toy car on a little conveyor belt.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it shows the difference. Yep. What happens if you put, the little ball on the front of the trailer or the ball on the back, how much impact it has. Something as simple as that should have been included in that course. Be interesting to know if it was. But then if you're going to have a course, who accredits the course operator and whether it gives the value and whether it gives what you need? So that's another step as well.
It's a really interesting conversation, and I'd like to hear from experienced caravanners. What do you make of all of this? Luke Boner, radioguy@gmail.com, and just follow the procedure. Please leave a voice message if you want to. Is there a National Australian Caravanning Association? Do they have a spokesperson? Can we get them on?
Mate, there are state groups. There is Caravanning Australia. They actually got funding out of the NHVR many, many years ago to do something. It took a long time to get it done. They ended up with a website and it had some suitable information. There are many caravan-specific clubs, like there might be the Jayco Club and the Blue Caravan Club. There is the Australian Caravan Club, and the biggest group is the CMCA, the Camper Van and Motorhome Club of Australia. Now, in the past, they were generally for camper vans and motorhomes. And, if you've got your $1 million Winnebago, it's not quite the same as a bloke towing his Chesney, so they were a little bit more on the higher end of money spent in the market. I think they become a lot more inclusive. I've certainly been to some of their rallies and made contributions. I think their book is called The Wanderer, so I've had some pieces in there at times. They are the biggest group. But, Luke, it's a little bit like trying to get to every truck driver in Australia. If you're in a club, there is a chance to ask other club members for information. There's plenty of forums out there. Again, in this article I read last night, some of that information being given out is not entirely accurate or the best information because it's not verified or accredited. You can, of course, go to club rallies where they might have someone like me turn up or someone explain about the intricacies of new hitches. But it's the individual vanner, the bloke who just says, "No, I don't need nothing. I'm not going to join a club. I don't need any education. I'm going to buy me van, go around Australia." And how do we get to them to make sure they have the knowledge and education they need to do it safely.
You may not be able to successfully achieve that if they bring in legislation, and it would have to be national legislation, which is really tough. So you have to get all the states and territories to jump in the one hat.
Exactly.
They may well say, okay, all new caravan purchases from 2026. I bet you that's what they do if they do it.
Well, we know how hard it is to get the states to align because we're still fighting with them to get the NHVR, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, across the whole country in one plane sort of thing.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to do that. We've made some improvement. But yes, what you say is, and it's the states that have made it hard for the NHVR. It's the states that don't want to give up that power. And yet we have a National Road Safety Centre. We have these things that look at every person driving on our roads should have suitable knowledge and education of the law, and yet the states will turn around and have one law in Victoria where you turn right out of the left-hand lane, for example, for the trams.
Melbourne,
And we spoke about the lady in the motorhome who drove through South Australia on her, inaugural leg of her first trip around Australia, and wasn't aware of the 25 km/h speed limit when police are on the side of the road in South Australia, lost her licence in a van, and the whole trip was destroyed. So we need something because we all live in the same place, Australia.
All right. Okay, so we'll contact either Caravanning Australia or approach a club. But what was the big one that you mentioned?
CMCA, the Camper Van and Motorhome Club of Australia, CMCA.
Got an interesting story from Big Rig. I don't know whether you know Glenn Stirl.
I do. I spoke to him 2 days ago.
Did you? He's a veteran industry advocate, and he's a WA Labor senator and a former
He's
owner.
also the chair of our Rest Area Steering Committee.
Isn't that interesting? Okay. And he's a former owner-driver. He believes the illegal practice that sidesteps the usual employee entitlements and tax obligations is making it increasingly difficult for those doing the right thing to compete. Yes. This veteran industry advocate has issued a blunt warning to operators exploiting truckies on sham ABN contracts. Explain.
Australian business number. So instead of you employing a driver, I'm Fred. Fred turns up at Bill's Transport. Bill employs Fred as a driver. He's then under an award, and he works to demand as it is. So instead of that, Bill says to Fred, "Oh, mate, you go and get an ABN, and I'll employ you as like a subby." And because he then gets an ABN, one can walk away from the other. There aren't the requirements to be paid under the award. It's like a separate agreement. And instead of the driver being paid what he is entitled to under the award for his kilometres or hours or whatever the case may be, he's told, "Oh, I'm going to give you so much for this trip and so much for that trip." And again, this applies to people who have come from overseas where their living conditions aren't the same. They're not aware of what they should be getting here. They don't go and do that research. They come here and say, "Oh, look, I want a job." "Well, mate, there's the truck. You get an ABN. I'll employ you as a subby, and this is what I'm going to pay you." Now, they take off and they think, "Oh, this is all right. I'm getting paid for this." But they're working, 18, 20 hours a day. They're doing enormous kilometres to try and earn money. And then they find out that they've been ripped off. In the meantime, the bloke who is paying them these reduced costs to him is undercutting other people who are paying the proper wages, and he's getting the work. So he gets all the work. The drivers doing it aren't getting paid properly, so they're being pushed into shortcutting. If they're employed as an owner-driver, they've got their own truck. They've got to go and find ways to, pay for tyres, pay for fuel, do all that management, maintenance. And, of course, if they're not being paid the right amount, well, then they haven't got the money to do that. So then they start cutting corners and things as well. And it's well known in the industry that has been one of the bugbears, that people are able to shortcut the system and undercut rates and employ drivers that way.
I would like to get Glenn Stirl on Truckee Tuesday, Rod. So can we talk later, and you can give me his details, or I'll just have to go through his office. He is a senator, so he represents all of WA. He doesn't have a local constituency, but I'd love to get him on.
Yes, he's got to be in Canberra next Thursday. for our Rest Area Steering Committee meeting. At this stage, I'll be attending via video link because I'm not going to be able to get there directly, and I've got to be away for 3 days the following week. I'm going to Townsville, so I'll get on to Glenn and see what we can do.
That'd be really, really good. Okay, some upcoming traffic changes on the Warrego Highway. This is for pavement works. There's going to be changed traffic conditions, including road closures along a section of the Warrego Highway in Queensland for pavement repair and resurfacing works. The works will take place on the Warrego Highway between Fernvale Road and Wulkuraka Connection Road, Black Soil. Do you know where that is?
Wulkuraka, yes.
Wulkuraka. I've never been to Wulkuraka.
Yes, I do know where that is, and then that's the major highway coming in from Toowoomba. I've got to say, mate, I've been over some rough loads lately, and certainly some narrow ones without any lines on them at all. They're that thin, so you barely get 2 trucks on them. But I hadn't been down from Condamine towards Miles until Thursday night, and that road is abysmal.
Is it?
I'm watching trailers dance and swing and sway and up and down and sideways. And I remember the road that used to go out from Gundawindi to to Mooney used to be like that. The rest of it's not so bad, but geez, about 25, 40 kilometres from Condamine South is probably one of the worst I've been on lately. And there's a lot of roads. We understand that. And it comes down to us reporting some of those things. I'll certainly be sending them a letter. But even potholes, I've got to ring a mate. There's some potholes up around the Fitzroy Development Road, west of Mackay, I found. I'm going to chase him up to get onto those. And there's just so much work to do. I see there was a piece on TV involving caravanners and others about the roads in Victoria, mate, about how they're not maintaining them down there. So it's not just one bit of road, it's our whole network, and the fact that whilst people are dying on the roads, we're not meeting our targets for reduction in deaths on the roads. To say that the roads are at fault is not the answer. You as the driver must drive to conditions. But if you don't know the condition of every road, or you come around a sweeping corner and there's a great big pothole in front of you, as there is up near Wandoan, how are you supposed to be able to deal with that? And then if you've got a van on and you decide to swerve to miss the pothole because you don't want to blow a tyre when you hit it with all your weight on it, and then the van starts swaying. So they cannot say that roads are not a contributing factor. We can't say, though, that roads are the only thing that's responsible for deaths on the road either.
All right, I'll tell you something I've noticed on my sat-nav, which is Waze. It completely relies on other Waze users to contribute, right? And it will often say pothole ahead, and it comes up 500 metres, 400 metres, 300 metres. Caution, road parked on shoulder. And of course, it gives you police warnings and red light camera warnings and all of that. But the spontaneous stuff is contributed by other Waze users, and then it says to you, still there with a question mark, and you push no, it's gone, or still there.
Yes. So, mate, but you've got to subscribe to that service, haven't you? There is a cost.
It's an app that we just downloaded. I don't know.
Oh. Okay, I thought that was one of those where you have to subscribe to it. It may be the case.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. We found the app and we downloaded it, and so it's on my phone. But Waze, I bought a new head unit because the one that the stock standard one in my car was dreadful. The sat nav.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'll find out if I'm paying for it.
Okay, because the other one we spoke of was Snap Send Solve. That's really good. I've had some people have success with that, and that's all right if you're in the car and you can pull up and take a photo. So I wonder then, Snap Send Solve sends it direct to the road authority.
Right.
Does Waze, when that pothole is notified anyone of it other than other users of the system? That would be something to follow up, Luke. We might be able to change the world.
I am following it up as we speak. I'll have answers for you. Just to finish this, for traffic travelling westbound on the Warrego Highway between Fernvale and what is it?
Walkaraka.
Okay. For traffic travelling westbound on the Warrego Highway between Fernvale Road and Walkaraka, never heard of it before, just learnt about it. The Fernvale Road on-ramp to the Warrego Highway will be closed for 3 nights between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. During these periods, traffic detours will be in effect and heavy vehicles will be directed via appropriate detour signs. Here is another interesting story. And the question is it time that the industry had a road freight licensing system? Over the past few months, we've seen transport companies shutting their doors at an alarming rate. And the article in Big Rig says, while we wring our hands and wail at the unfairness, it seems there is only one solution being touted: fix the rate issues. But is that the only solution? It goes on to say, when digging into the root cause of a problem, you would be naive to think there's only one. In the case of transport company closures, it's absolutely a suite of issues, not just one. Sure, rates are a problem. In what era have you ever seen the customer dictate the price? Rod?
Well, the customer does dictate the price, unfortunately, particularly if you're a big customer. And some of them used to have written into their contract that they wanted a 10% decrease the following year for productivity or whatever the case may be. Rates is a very hot issue. At some stage, mate, it's been made aware that virtually what we were getting 20 years ago for a pallet from Sydney to Melbourne is what we're getting now. In very simplistic terms, and I know it's not as simple as that, but the costs have gone up, and yet customers want bigger trucks. We have B doubles now where we had semis. So yes, we've done our part for productivity. There's talk that the Australian economy is not being as productive as it could be, and yet we've got AB triples running up and down the Newell Highway now at 100-tonne gross, whereas before we had single semi-trailers at 40. So we can't do any more unless we are given access to other roads to use those vehicles where they are safe and suitable. I'm not saying that trucks should be allowed to run pell-mell wherever they want. That's not going to work. But where the road system is suitable and we can get the bigger combinations, because it's no good back in the day, Luke, when B doubles first came on the road, everybody said, oh, look, these combinations, they're bigger, they're going to cart more freight, and you will go from one depot to another depot. And everybody said, yeah, in your dreams. And that's what it is now. You go and load at one place, then you go and split trailers and you load a bit more at another place, and then you go and deliver it and you've got to split a trailer to get it in there because there's not enough room for a B double. And the drivers have virtually worn the brunt of most of that. Some companies in the early days virtually didn't charge for the extra trailer. Yeah. Oh, we'll take your freight. We're going to get your contract. We'll get it off there, and then of course they weren't getting paid properly. And there's a whole raft, as it says. There is no simple solution. But if you are carting freight and you don't know what it costs you as the owner driver or the company to pick up and deliver that freight from A to B, how do you know what to charge? And if you don't charge what it costs you plus a profit margin, then you can't buy a new truck. You can't pay your drivers the right money. You can't maintain it and buy new tyres. So there has been talk of an accreditation scheme. Again, this has come up for years and years, that there needs to be a level of entry restriction. So at the moment, Luke, if I wanted to, I could go and buy a truck and a trailer tomorrow if I had the money, or if I go and finance it. So, of course, then I'm paying, interest on it and all those things, and I've got to come up with my $5,000 a month for my new Kenworth, let alone a trailer behind it, and then pay the fuel and the tyres and the wages. So I can go and do that tomorrow and start ringing people up, say, oh, I've got a truck, I'll cart your freight. How much do you pay now? Oh, I pay so much a kilometre. Oh, I'll do it cheaper than that. Now, of course, that goes all right until you get the 2 months down the track and suddenly you need to pay your fuel bill from last month and you think, oh, shit, I haven't had enough money to pay that. What am I going to do now? Oh, I'll go and do another cheap load and I'll be right, or I'll get more trucks. So if there is a level of industry entry point that you must meet, You might need to have done a business course as a manager. You might need to have some, a certain amount of money behind you. You might need to have certain contacts. But then that raises that level of entry point again, so it's more cost to get in. And we're talking about people getting out of the industry because the costs are too high. Is it the solution? I don't know that it's the perfect solution. Is it a possible solution so that those that come into the industry have at least a basis upon which to operate safely and soundly, rather than, I've got a truck, mate, I'll cart your freight cheaper than anybody else, and then, of course, next week they're broke and the next bloke does the same thing, and you go round and round, and it's a treadmill, and it's called the race to the bottom, Luke.
Oh, but I guess it's like if you want to run any business, you've got to really check what your overheads are.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Rod, very good. What's your question for the week?
The question is, well, can I come back? I want to go deep and meaningful for a minute, Luke.
Yes.
Right. Now, I listened to your interview with Matthew, the songwriter that did Our Church.
Oh, Matt Cornell, yeah.
Matt Cornell, yes. I listened to that during the week. You've got to put me in touch with him. I've got a song. We've got to get a song to promote the industry. And your blokes that did our promo, they did contact me and said that they heard us talk about it a couple of episodes ago about having an industry song. So we're going to do that. But listening to Matty and about Our Church and that, and I know that you said that the church people jumped up and down. Mate, there is a lack of purpose. There is a lack of cohesion. Many years ago, a bloke sent me this CD about Our Tribe, and it's on a similar vein. People want to belong.
Yep.
They want something to aspire to. Now, the church did that for some, and it still does for others. People go to church. They follow their religion. Whether you're a bona fide or anything else, you're entitled to do that. But I would like to, with your reach and a little bit of input, I think we need to come up with something to give people something to aim for. Now, I'm trying to do this within the road transport industry as well. I'm pursuing the ATA and I'm waiting to hear back from them. But let's say we started a group called the Bona Fiders. Now, I think the only thing that you really need to be one, and we talked about selling common sense, mate, so we've got to get some money somewhere, but you can't sell it, you can't educate people about it. But if we had a motto of think before you act. Now, we know people do stupid things because they don't think about what they're going to do. We know that they say stupid things, and of course, we all know where we've said something wrong to our partner, and in 25 years they still remember, and you can't remember what the hell you did wrong that long ago.
Yes.
And then we have keyboard warriors who sit there and go, oh, you bastards, this, that, and the other, and hit enter, and then it's too late. It's out there, and you're the worst on earth. So if we had something that said, to be a bona fider, we can't make you have common sense, but we ask you to do three things. You think before you act, and you don't have to spend an hour. It might be a second, it might be two. You think before you speak, because you know you've got to engage the brain before the mouth, and you think before you hit the enter key. And if people did that, it's not going to make their life so much longer, shorter, worse, or better. I think it's going to make it a lot better that you just have that one thought before you make that action that goes too far, that is irrevocable and makes things worse for everybody else. You know? So if you think about before you push out into the traffic in front of that truck, what could happen? You think about, if I really say that to my partner, is that going to make it better or worse? And you think, if I write that down, that Fred Nurk is a so-and-so, and I put it online and it's out there, it's too late and you can't get it back. And I would like your thoughts. You've got the Reverend Jim. You've got people like Charles, who I'm listening to his podcast. You've got notable, successful, and people with common sense. And I think we need to find a way to spread that, Luke.
The bona fides. We will make that happen. And I'll put you in touch with Matt Cornell because he's a terrific bloke, isn't he?
Yep.
Right, Hanafi, get back to it. What's the question for the week?
Okay, so what looks like a road train, has the combined parts of a road train, and drives like a road train, but isn't?
That's the question. Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. Go onto our Facebook, Luke Boner, that radio guy, and please press on the red button that lets you leave a voice message because we love that as well. Rod Hannafy, safe trucking. I hope your truck gets better. Give it a kiss for me, and I'll talk. Give it a kiss and a cuddle, and I'll talk to you soon.
Certainly will, mate. Safe travelling to all.
Thank you so much for listening. Episode 37 done and dusted. We need your feedback. We need suggestions. Who would you like us to talk to? What would you like to say? Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. Jump on our Facebook. You can see all the pictures. Please leave us voice messages so that we can respond. Keep loving each other. And my advice, if you go to a Coldplay concert, keep it nice. Okay, now listen, before you go, a quick reminder, winter doesn't have to walk all over you. Get on the front foot. Nature Bees Power Pollen. It is your winter defense kit. More energy, immune support, nutrients, antioxidants, and it's all in one beautiful little golden capsule. And you don't need to swallow the capsules whole either. I mean, you can just sprinkle it on your breakfast, on your porridge, in your smoothies, in your juice. Power Pollen's sweet, nutty taste is both a flavour and an energy boost. And it's proof that it's just Mother Nature. You can grab a 6-month supply for $160, and they're throwing in an extra month and 2 bars of their famous pollen and honey soap for free. Comes with a money-back guarantee, otherwise I wouldn't endorse it, and I've been taking it since the year 2000. Click the link in the description and order yours today and say goodbye to winter blues. Nature Bee, helping you stay on top of winter and not under it. And a big thanks to Nature Bee for powering up another bona fide episode. Look, let's wrap it up with my last piece of wisdom. It's rodent related. Don't lose sleep over things that scurry in your roof and behind your walls. All you've got to do is plug in Pestrol's rodent-free Max and let it do the worry. It's $139. It comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee, a 2-year warranty, and you know what? I'll take the odds. Head to pestrol.com.au or call 1-800-338888, 1-800-33-8888. Pestrol. Problem solved. And the links are in the description.